Welcome to SmokeHouseStudios.net. The in-studio broadcast feed is now live.
Warning. This show is about the return of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. If you are easily offended by the truth, then you need to keep listening. His return is drawing near.
SmokeHouseStudios.net. The Front Porch Show. A unique blend of current events and what they might mean. Humbly seen through the eyes of God's Word, the Bible, in an old school front porch discussion with occasional guests, your input, and a guiding hand through Christ. Broadcasting from atop the front porch, it's SmokeHouseStudios.net's The Front Porch Show. Now, carefully blending more smoke goodness in each and every soundbite, your host, Smokehouse.
Hey, hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, friends, wherever you may be across the globe, across the United States. Old Smokehouse with you here. September the 11th, 2021, 20 years after the Twin Towers came down, and boy, what 20 years will do, folks. The very Muslims that brought down our towers have now been given their land. All of the battling that we have done because of September the 11th, 2001 was for nothing, because our commander-in-chief here in the United States just basically handed back their country to the enemy. Nothing is being done. Nothing is being done about any of this. They are the governments, not only in America but worldwide. It seems as though they are allowed to have free reign and do as they please with no punishment. And so, what does all this mean? That's why tonight we titled the program, "Who Can War?" Who can war? And we'll get to a little bit more of what that means. Our United Kingdom liaison, Sister Jamie, is going to be on the program with us tonight, and we'll bring her on in just a second. We've got an outstanding show planned for you. There was a lady by the name of Barbara Francis, and she had a word from the Lord this week, and we need to be careful when those come to us with a word from the Lord. I'm always cautious of these things, but what she said, it seems to make sense. And she said, and this is her saying this is from the Lord, another evil leader is in the making, and he's groomed by Satan himself. And you have seen the past atrocities by the dictator Hitler. Have you learned from this? You have seen evidence of the death camps, and you have heard testimony from the survivors. You have seen the images of starvation, and you have seen the mass graves, and you have heard firsthand accounts. My children, lessons have not been learned. Once again, a man will rise to power and continue with mass extermination of the people of the nations. This man is here now and among you. He mocks and he ridicules my name. I am and my power. And he will exalt himself, and with his mouth he'll speak blasphemy, and he will proclaim that he is God, the Savior, the Messiah. And many will believe the lie and sweet words and false promises from a beast. And I tell you now, before the slaughter begins, do not follow along as blind sheep. Stand firm on my word, and let the Holy Spirit lead and guide you in all truth. Lean not on your own understanding. The appointed times have arrived. I see many deceivers in the land. Turn away and live. I am the only way to eternal life. So seek after me now while I am waiting for you, and you will find me. And here, she put in here, do not trust another. And this is one reason why I chose to share this with you tonight, because that's exactly what the show was last week. Trust no man. So do not trust another. You have been warned to prepare by messengers and prophets, another deadly winter lies ahead. And just as I warned you, plagues are coming. I now warn you, the Antichrist is here. Okay, a deadly winter, more plagues are coming, and we shared Mike on the program last week, and it was an hour-long interview, and he was somewhat vague in his descriptions of what he was telling us. This week, he did another interview, and it's another hour long, but this time there's meat on the bone. He goes into detail about what he was talking about last week, and it's an amazing amount of information. So again, I'm still short-winded, and this will help me as I'm regaining my strength. But let's not hesitate. Let's bring on our guest, Sister Jamie, over there in the United Kingdom. Sister Jamie, welcome to the Front Porch Show.
Hello, Greg. It's great to be back. Thank you for inviting me back.
Well, it's great to have you, and I know that you wanted to come on for September 11th, and we'll get in a moment to how September 11th impacted y'all over there across the water. But tonight's show, Jamie, we titled, Who Can War? And the reason that I titled it this is because we can see all around us. I mean, this week, President Biden basically came out and threatened the American people. He threatened the governors of certain states, and he has placed a nationwide mandate that it appears all of these companies are treating as law, that's not how law works in this land, but he is telling any business that has 100 employees or more, they must mandate the shot. Now, Christ tells us in his word, do not be deceived. Is the shot the mark of the beast? It's every week it's looking like it can be, folks. And now you're about to lose your livelihood, lose basically everything that you have unless you submit and take this shot. This is happening globally. We're going to get with Jamie about what they're doing in the UK, but the point here is, folks, is that this is serious. And we're going to have a decision to make. And we sit around, we ask ourselves, well, who would we sue? We don't have a court system that's legit that would handle the lawsuit. Dr. Fauci came out with proof that documentations and emails that he did create this disease in a Wuhan lab in China. It is gain of function. And we have Rand Paul has all of the documents, has all of the emails, has all of the proof, and he has 200 scientists that back this up. He has sent the order to the DOJ, Biden's DOJ, for Dr. Fauci to be arrested for lying to Congress. And the DOJ is not even going to touch it. So we don't have anyone in a court system, a government system that is on our side. They are purposely creating this disease, which has been proven. They have released it on the people as a bioweapon of control. And now it's our fault that it is spreading because of the unvaccinated. They have turned their cannons on us. So how are we going to defend ourselves? Who are we going to defend ourselves with? We know the beast is rising, and that's what Revelation 13 says. The beast that comes out of the sea. We've covered it many times, but we move down here to around verse 4 where it says, men worshipped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshipped the beast, and they asked, who is like the beast, and who can make war against him? Okay, so John here tells us that when this beast rises, there's no way that we're going to be able to defeat it. So tonight's title is, Who Can Make War? Sister Jamie, I greatly appreciate your patience in the intro.
It's okay.
But get us caught up. We've got a list of things that we are wanting to talk about tonight. And COVID passports is the first thing I would like to touch on, because here in America, it's looking like, with what Biden has done, that's not a law, but yet corporations everywhere is treating it like that. We very soon are going to have a vaccine passport, or we're not going to be able to buy, sell, or trade. So how is that going in England with the passport?
Well, towards the end of September, they're going to bring in what they call a COVID pass. They're not using the word passport, even though the full passport is basically, that's exactly what it is. We're not going to be allowed to go into nightclubs or big indoor or outdoor venues without either a passport or other proof of vaccination, which is 2 shots of the AstraZeneca or Pfizer vaccine or one of the Janssen one. I don't tend to, I'm quite reclusive. I'm a bit like you. You're happy if you've got your river nearby and you go out and you do your own thing. But it's going to get to the stage where you will not be able to go out to dine or drink or visit anywhere without, if you don't have an actual COVID passport, you're going to at least have to take your vaccination card that you got when you had the jab. And if you haven't got proof of having 2 jabs, then they won't let you in. Simple as that. And even now, you have to book online. You can't just wake up in the morning and think, oh, I'll go to the zoo today. If you want to take your kids to the zoo, you've got to book it all in advance, because they're only letting a certain amount of people in at any given time. So you have to book your tickets, and then they can judge in advance how many people will be in the zoo or the whatever entertainment it might be, to keep the crowds to a minimum. And as for the European travel and worldwide travel, you won't be allowed on a plane without either the COVID passport or proof of double vaccination from the end of September. You won't be able to go anywhere unless you have that proof.
Wow. Okay. So see, this is what's coming to America, because we're thinking that businesses that were 100 people or more, that's just your work corporate businesses, right? No. That's going to mean Walmart's, any corporate entity that we go to, not only our job people, but grocery stores, everything else. We're going to be just like Europe. You're going to have to show a passport, because if that company employs 100 or more, they have to enforce this. And they're going to enforce it, because that's how they're getting around the Constitution, is they are, for the corporate entity is their strong man, is what I'm trying to say. Now, Jamie, we have got UK Matt Hancock. Do you know who Matt Hancock is?
Yeah, he was the Secretary of State for Health until last June, June this year. And he was asked to leave because he was having an affair with a married woman. So, yeah, he's not a very popular person over here.
All right. Well, I've got a clip of him, and I want y'all to listen, folks. Now, a lot of these clips, you have to understand, they are deleting these clips as quickly as they can, because they don't want the public to know that they exist. So when we find them, sometimes they've had to be bootlegged off a phone and then, shared on the underground. So a few clips tonight that we have are a little rough. But this is Matt Hancock. Listen to what he said in an interview.
Could you tell who you are, what you do, and actually where you live as well?
I'm Matt Hancock. I'm the UK Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, and I'm also the proud shareholder of Genomics England, which is one of the most cutting-edge organisations for genome sequencing in the world. And we, in December, hit the target of 100,000 whole genome sequenced, and we have reiterated a new goal of reaching a million in the UK over the next 5 years. And the critical next phase will be to deliver that within clinical settings in a way that improves people's lives.
Okay, so that was a clip from 2019, and Jamie, I assume in 2019 he was still the secretary?
Yeah, he was. He was booted out 3 months ago.
Okay.
And Sajid Javid took over. But the interesting thing is, they're not actually his personal shares in the company. The shares are given to the current Secretary of State for Health, and then they're revoked when that person leaves, and the new secretary is given the shares as part of perks of the job. So the shares have now passed on to Sajid David, who is the new Secretary of Health.
Okay, that's good information to know. So basically, those shares stay there, and whoever is secretary at the time reaps from that, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right, good information. So here we have these people in power that are reaping benefits if they do what the globalist government wants them to do, while we have to suffer. We have to give up our rights, give up our jobs. We are the ones that are being punished because of them purposely releasing this upon the populace. Are we grasping that concept yet, folks? So, all right, Jamie. Are they talking in the UK or England? Are they talking about not necessarily concentration camps, but are they talking about places that they can take people if they refuse to take the vaccine? It's like a green zone or a place like that. Are they talking about that in England?
No, they're not talking about that. What we do have at Heathrow Airport, as in any big international airport, there is a detention centre which was used for its primary purpose. Obviously, if any undesirables get off a plane, and the same in the States. I know they get put in a detention camp at the airport, or a holding camp. But a few months ago and last year, when travel started up again, it really hit the fan, because when the media found out and the populace found out, people that were coming off the planes that had caught COVID or hadn't had 2 jabs, and you're talking English, British people here, not foreigners, were put in in what they called the holding establishment at Heathrow, which was basically the detention centre for immigrants. And there was a big kick-off about it last year, and earlier this year. I can't remember the timeline exactly now. But yeah, we had people, English passport holders, British passport holders, that were being held at the airport and not allowed to return home because they had tested positive of COVID, or they didn't have both the jabs, or they didn't have the right paperwork. So yeah, that kicked off a storm over here. But we haven't got I know the kind of camps you're talking about, but I don't think they'd dare have them over here, to be perfectly honest. I think that would be one step too far. I don't think the people over here would tolerate that.
No, I don't think they will. With everything that we're seeing coming out for all of the protests that they have just about every weekend, people almost up into the hundreds and hundreds of thousands, which is great to see. France is doing the same thing, but over in Australia, folks, they are purposely now. They have already broke ground and they have graded land, and they're using the Australian taxpayer dollars to build actual concentration camps, folks, and they're openly bragging about it. They have the news cameras down there showing the land. Check this out. Unbelievable.
Howard Springs near Darwin is held up as the gold standard of quarantine. Separate cabins, on-site testing, catering, and so far, no known breaches. But the Queensland Government reckons it can do better.
This is going to be a great boost for our defence against the Delta virus.
State Cabinet has signed off on the Wellcamp facility, first proposed 7 months ago. Businessman John Wagner will build it next door to his airport.
We will have the first 500 beds operational before Christmas.
The state government will lease it and run it. The cost to taxpayers is being kept under wraps.
What fantastic value it will be if we can avoid just one lockdown.
The federal government's previously rejected the plan on grounds it's too far from a tertiary hospital, but the Deputy Premier's declared it
the perfect location.
Still, some old sticking points remain, like will international flights to Wellcamp be approved?
Well, we hope so. So we'll be continuing those discussions with the federal government. But we can bus people from Brisbane up here if we have to.
They could have done that months ago if that's what they wish to do. But good for them, and I wish them every success.
The Prime Minister was given no notice of today's announcement, nor Toowoomba's mayor.
It may be a good thing for the economy in Toowoomba, but let's hope that there's no outbreaks, that there's no problems with it.
If they get on top of it early and if they plan it well, it could be a good thing.
I think it's absolutely ridiculous. We do not have the medical facilities here in Toowoomba.
The Premier says any COVID patients will be transported to Brisbane. And so Queensland will have 2 purpose-built quarantine facilities. The Commonwealth is backing one here on Defence land at Pinkenba near Brisbane Airport. There'll be rooms for 1,500 people by the middle of next year.
Okay, so they're building quarantine centers, folks, calling it wellness centers, treating it as though it's it's nothing more than like a hospital to help out with the medical fields. Now, what have we been saying? They forced the vaccine on the medical field, and the people that are rejecting the vaccine are losing their jobs, and now they don't have enough healthcare workers to help the sick. This justifies building a quote-unquote wellness center. Well, what have we been saying? Just like Governor Lee, Executive Order 83, to help out with the lack of employees at the hospitals now, to help out the hospitals, they're going to start building green zones. Green zones. Now, Jamie, this is an interesting one. This is kind of a rough clip, but maybe you'll be able to understand it. I guess this is the press secretary of Australia was asked a question. It's short, so listen close.
Will exposure sites be put back in place, especially with reopening and people going back to pubs and stuff? Because our exposure sites still... Will they be put back in place to be listed once we are reopening? Because they're not at the moment.
We will be looking at what contact tracing looks like in the New World Order.
All right. So the question was asked, once all of these orders are put in place and people can start going back to pubs, are we going to go back to normal? And she says, we will look at contact tracing in the New World Order. So, Jamie, they're getting it set up. They're getting people scared and in fear of losing everything that they've got to take this shot, because what this contact tracing is all about is the digital ID that will go along with it to prove that you have had the vaccine, i.e., whether it's the vaccine or whether it's the digital ID that's the mark of the beast, it is en route. So what say you about this?
Well, we've had track and trace here for well over a year. There's an app, the NHS, which is the National Health Service, got an app that you have to enter your details on. And this is since, well over a year ago, when things first started to open up in between lockdowns last year. And if you went anywhere, you had to enter the details of where you were, where you'd been, who you were with. And the government had all your details on file, so they could basically keep track of everywhere you'd been. And if you were in contact with anyone who since tested positive for COVID within, I think, about 10 days, they were contacting you. And they weren't literally placing a guard outside your house, but they would phone you up anything up to 12 times a day, because they can track your phone anyway. And if your phone moved from outside your house, they would pounce. The police would pounce on you. So yeah, we've had that for over a year now. It's not very nice. It's like 1984, and that was before the vaccine. That was before the I don't know what's in the vaccine, whether it's just a vaccine or whether there's a microchip in there or what. But yeah, the track and trace on our phones, they know exactly where we are. They have done for most of this pandemic since things were reopened in June and July of last year. They've known exactly where we are.
Wow. Okay. So they're basically getting y'all accustomed to it via your phone. It seems that every nation is doing it. different ways, but still nonetheless, they're all heading to the same point once it's all implemented, and getting everybody accustomed to this however the nation sees fit. So, is it happening in America yet? Well, check this out. The health department in Michigan, they sent out a letter, and the people of Michigan lost their minds and started jumping on them for what they had said, and all they did was just kind of go back and change some words in the letter. Check this out. If you don't think it's happening in America, here you go.
A county in Michigan under major fire for sending out contact tracing letters to parents, mandating that their kids must get quarantined because they believe they have or else.
Say what?
That's how it goes in Michigan, right under
That's
Whitman.
a major problem, y'all.
And some of their county leaders, too,
Wait till you get
like
this
in
letter.
Allegheny County. The health department there facing major backlash. This is the letter they sent out. Dear parents, the Allegheny County Health Department has become aware that your son or daughter is a close contact to a COVID-positive individual, and we've determined that he or she is a carrier, as defined by Michigan law. Yeah, Michigan mandate from a dictator. You are hereby notified that you are required to cooperate with the Allegheny County Health Department in efforts to prevent or control the transmission of the serious disease or infection. If you fail to take actions prescribed in the warning notice, the Allegheny County Health Department shall petition the circuit court, get this, ready? To seek an order to compel your compliance, which may result in you being taken into protective custody to protect the public's health. What the? Sounds like Australia.
It almost slipped out.
County Health Department has now adjusted their letter after facing some criticism.
Oh, we adjusted.
Okay. One of the residents that pushed back hard against that letter is Michigan gubernatorial candidate Garrett Soldano, and he joins us once again on the program. Garrett, thank you so much for bringing what's happening in Michigan to my team's attention. I did not know this was happening. I read that before we came on the air, so that's only the second time I've read what that letter said, and let me tell you, as hopefully you can tell in my voice, disgusted as hell. Threatening. If you don't comply with our COVID law, bullcrap, it's a mandate by a dictator of a governor.
Amen. Amen, people. It's happening here now. They're gradually turning the heat up. You're the frog boiling in the pot. So it's happening here. And we're allowing it to happen. And see, Jamie, this is why we know the beast is rising. Again, when we go back and we read it, when it talks about, this beast that's going to be rising. Now, I'm not saying that Biden's the Antichrist, and I'm not even here trying to say who the Antichrist is, but the system that the Antichrist is going to control is rising, which means the Antichrist is just around the corner. Who it is doesn't matter, because the beast system is coming after us, the ripest apple on the tree, thee. And again, men worship the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshiped the beast and asked, who is like the beast and who can make war against it? So how can we make war against this beast that is so big, that has so many veins in everything, that could control our lives, not only here in America, but Jamie, over in the UK? I mean, let me ask you, over there, who could you turn to for this? I mean, it is though they have already taken y'all over, right?
Yeah, I haven't trusted anyone in government for a very long time. And I don't trust the MSM now, the mainstream media. I don't believe a word they tell me. It was interesting last week when you said, having been ill and you felt closer to God, and you now basically trusted no man, not even your own government. And I felt like that for a very long time anyway. It's all lies and lies and lies. But I was interested in one thing. I don't know, maybe I'm talking off the top of my head there, but I mean, could there conceivably be more than one Antichrist? I mean, could the devil put himself into, parts of himself into different world leaders and split him off into several Antichrists? Could he do that?
Well, yeah, and as a matter of fact, that is the very case, because we're in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, we're told that the spirit of lawlessness, which is what the Antichrist is bringing and is all about, that the spirit of lawlessness will be at work until the man of lawlessness is revealed. And so that's exactly what you just said. Yes, the Antichrist spirit is just flourishing throughout all leaderships. And I would assume, now this is just my opinion, I would assume that once Satan has, possessed all of the beast system, okay, which would include the leaders and the investment groups and all that, and they have everything in place where they want it and the control that they feel that they need to have, then that's when the one man will rise up that everyone will look to. But yes, you are correct. Yes, the spirit of lawlessness is still at work in all of these leaders.
Yeah, because I know I was brought up to believe in, the traditional devil, antichrist, whatever, is like one person or one beast or one thing, and typically described as a beast with horns and a tail and all the rest of it. But I've often wondered if he, where he's so powerful, if he could divide himself off into dozens or hundreds of different souls, take over different people's souls if he needed to. Mm-hmm. He could take over the British government and the American government and the European government, the heads of state, the banks, a little bit of everybody. He could spread himself out. So I was wondering that last week, actually, when I was listening to the interview between Paul and Mike. It made me wonder about that.
Well, and you're very right. In Daniel, Daniel talks about that this beast, the beast system, that they will have the power to change laws, okay? Change laws and all of these things. It's amazing how that's exactly what they're doing. I mean, they're changing not only laws in America, but they're changing your laws over there in Australia, taking people's rights. They're changing everything. And so we're seeing the Word of God literally just jump off the pages here. We had an order that we were going to go in when we were talking earlier. You wanted to speak on 9/11. We'll save that to last because I want to jump to the geologists and those that are doing some digging, because in this interview we're going to share later, Mike goes into detail. Now, if y'all remember, folks, Stephen Benoon that we played a while back had talked about how they were digging up artifacts when Paul was on the program with us. And these artifacts were half man, half reptiles. They had like a man's body, but a reptilian head. And they're now finding new artifacts from ancient days of half man and half animal. And Mike is going to go into deep detail because he has got writings from other ancient areas that kind of speak on this. We know that John the Baptist and Christ actually called the Pharisees and the Sadducees vipers and snakes. So our religious teachings today is like, oh, well, that was just an analogy that Christ used in order for us to know how evil these people were. Well, now that we're finding these artifacts, Jamie, of these actual half man, half reptile, half man, half beast, could it be that Christ and John the Baptist were not using an analogy? Could they have been direct and to the point, stating a very fact that these people were of a reptilian race? And Paul was on the program that time, and we were discussing this. So this is what I want to get into now. We can touch on that, but last week, Mike was talking about a water event, okay? And he goes a little bit deeper in this interview of what he meant by that. But you and I were talking because last week Mike had said that in the near future, coming up on winter, we're going to start seeing land masses sink while other land masses rise up. And that kind of sparked your interest because you had been looking into Atlantis and stuff like that. So fill us in.
Yeah, well, as the listeners may well remember, Mike and Paul last week were talking about a landmass that the scientists, they've been monitoring it, and it's slowly rising in the North Atlantic. And I know that Atlantis is a myth. I know there were so many different ideas on what might and might not have happened. But one school of thought is that where the Canary Islands are, which is just off the coast of Spain in the North Atlantic, those islands are actually the very top of the mountains that surrounded Atlantis, and they're basically the only part of Atlantis that is still above water. That's one school of thought. Because Atlantis was quite a big area. Most people think it was just a city. It wasn't. It was a city surrounded by mountains and valleys and what have you. And it sank about 12,000 years ago, from what I've read. It was founded by the Anunnaki and the Nephilim, which would have been about 445,000 years ago, I think. And apparently they had the sort of tech that we take for granted now. The Atlanteans had that, so the myth goes. But anyway, what made me wonder when Mike mentioned about the land rising in the Atlantic, Edgar Casey, the sleeping prophet, when he went into one of his trances, he did say that he felt that Atlantis would rise. And it made me wonder if, coming up to the end of this year, if we do get landmass shifts caused by whatever reason, whether it's the pole shift or whatever Mike calls it, if Atlantis, if not physically rising out of the water, if the level of the Atlantic Ocean itself drops, for whatever reason that might be, that would actually reveal Atlantis. Even if the land itself doesn't rise, it has the same effect, and Atlantis will be visible again. So that interested me, and I just wondered, I thought I'd mention it, and then you could tell the listeners what the scripture says about all that.
Yeah, we can. And I have listened to Edgar Casey through the years on Art Bell back in the 90s, and everything they were saying then, I was like, man, you guys are out of your mind. I don't even know. But now I can look back on a lot of the things that they said, and we are actually seeing. They warned us back then in the 90s about a lot of massive volcano eruptions just all over the earth. And here we are now. We're actually seeing that. We're seeing 7.0s, earthquakes. Just had one in Mexico. We're seeing all of these things. And here on the show, folks, I've got to be honest with you. We don't know if this would be something that maybe God is sending to cause this, or if this is just the actual power that Christ has as he is returning that is shaking up the earth. And so what we're going to focus on tonight is whatever is causing this, it is happening. And about 2 years ago, I was listening to Mike on an interview. And we know how Mike shares stories. He kind of does it in parables and hypotheses, like, what if this were to happen? And, Jamie, this is why it sparked my attention with you, because I remember 2 years ago in an interview, he talked about a water event coming at some point. And he gave the example. He said, let's just say, for the sake of arguing, that let's just say possibly the Canary Islands, there was an earthquake there, and they were to break apart and fall down into the Atlantic Ocean. Well, that much weight falling into the ocean would cause a massive tsunami that would spread all the way to the east coast of the United States, the west coast of Africa, all the way up into England, where you are. And it got me to thinking, because when you had brought that up about Atlantis, now, like you said, it's a myth. We don't know if that's the case, but it's interesting how things are starting to be shown to us. How the Tower of Babel, Mount Kaladesh out there, could be the Tower of Babel, because, scientists say that's not a natural formation. That looks man-made with brick. Things like this are starting to come to light, and God told us, everything done in the darkness will be exposed to the light. So, can we back this up biblically? In Isaiah 24, this is what is going to happen to the earth. And Isaiah says, "See, the Lord is going to lay waste to the earth and devastate it. He will ruin its face and scatter its inhabitants. It will be the same for the priest as for the people, the master for the servant, the mistress for the maid, the seller for the buyer, for the borrower and the lender, for the debtor and the creditor. The earth will be completely laid waste and totally plundered. The Lord has spoken this word." Okay? Well, this is saying basically the Lord's fixing to put his boot in the earth and literally just devastate it. And no one's going to escape from it. That was the analogy here for the priest and the people, the master and the servant. Everyone is going to be affected by this. Now, he goes on in verse 4 to say, "The earth dries up and it withers, and the world languishes and withers. The exalted of the earth languish." Jamie, the Colorado River right now out that feeds all of the water for the desert out there in Nevada, California, and all that thing is drying up. I mean, it's almost like a creek now, and it used to be a massive river. Are y'all having any waterways that you know of in your area drying up?
Not really, no. Don't forget we're an island and we have a lot of rain. And, we've had flash floods because of this. We've had heat waves, and we've had flash floods after the heat waves and thunderstorms. Water levels are generally lower than they were, but, that's a normal summer thing over here. I don't think they might be slightly less than normal summer levels. I don't know. That's not really something I've ever thought about. You might be right, but it's not something I'm aware of.
Okay. Well, Mike, when he did the interview last week, Paul kind of touched on that, how it's all drying up over there and what that might mean. As we go on in Isaiah 24, check this out. This is why God is going to do this to the earth. The earth is defiled by its people, and they have disobeyed the laws, and they have violated the statutes and broken the everlasting covenant. Now, we can look around even overseas in Europe, Australia, Asia, even in America. Basically, we've turned our backs on God. We are not obeying his laws anymore. Everything is going to this new age beast system, the transgenderism, homosexuality. If you are of the old way, they want you gone, okay? And that's what this vaccine and the camps and all that's about. Therefore, a curse consumes the earth, and its people must bear their guilt. The earth's inhabitants are burned up, and very few are left. The new wine dries up, and the vine withers, and all the merrymakers groan. Everything that's in here talks about the ruined cities. They lie desolate, and the entrance to every house is barred. In the streets they cry out for wine. All joy turns to gloom. All of these things, they raise their voices. They shout for joy from the west, and they acclaim the Lord's majesty. And therefore in the east give glory to the Lord. Exalt the name of the Lord and the God of Israel. So Isaiah here, he describes a total devastation that's going to affect everybody. And everything is going to dry up. It's going to wither. And we have Mike talking about a water event. I don't know what that would be, but with the rising and falling, with the magma that's underneath the earth and the earthquakes. Jamie, we had a 7.0 earthquake in Mexico just mere days ago, and it shook all the way up into California. And California now, wildfires, droughts, and now earthquakes that's ripping apart their land. God is obviously not happy with California. So, and then look at this election. Look at what they're doing with the election. This is my opinion, but could this have been timing? Because Tuesday, I believe it is the new election, because they're trying to boot Gavin Newsom out as governor. Could Biden have thrown this monkey wrench into the nation to help Newsom get reelected in California by just totally throwing businesses and corporations and employees into chaos over this stupid vaccine mandate? I don't know. And then, Jamie, we're going to move to what you were telling me about the British military that I did not know, and you can't really find this anywhere, but we have Biden now that's handed Afghanistan back to the Taliban, and he just left everything and just left Americans, left everything. And it caused our allies to be in a catch-22 position. What do? We don't have America now backing us up. We've got to do something. And so these nations had to send in like their special forces to get their people out. And that made a bold statement to our allies that said we can no longer count on America. Now, Jamie, man, you told me some fascinating things. Share what y'all's military are considering.
Yeah, well, as you just said, when Biden, I should say, pulled the American troops out of Afghan, we, being the British Army and the different European, French, German armies, who I'm not sure it was the NATO army, the NATO allies, were out there, we couldn't stay. We wanted to stay and protect our own people. But without US air support and US logistics, we're screwed. We can't keep boots on the ground without American help. So we had no choice but to pull out. Well, for years, leaders in Europe, especially in France and Germany, have been very, very keen on the idea of a pan-European army, which would be millions strong. I mean, you're talking about not having national armies as such, but a European army. I mean, Europe, there's over 550 million people in Europe, so you can imagine the size a European army would be. And the idea is to have that so that if there are any, or the next time there's a war in the Mideast and we need to go in and sort it out, or, that sounds awful, go in and sort it out, but, if we ever get involved in any more trouble out in the Middle East, we won't need to depend on America. We won't need to depend on Biden or any other, whoever's president at the time, because basically at the moment, without you, we can't go into those sort of hotspots on our own. We just don't have the manpower. So we do at the moment rely on America, but if we had a pan-European army, we'd be big enough, we wouldn't need that support. It's not a popular idea with the general public because of the cost, for one thing. The whole logistic of setting something like that up. The language, not to mention the language barriers. I can't even remember how many countries are in Europe now, but it's a good couple of dozen, so you can imagine the language problems. But Macron of France and Merkel of Germany are very, very keen on the idea, and this whole Afghan fiasco has got them, them really revved up about it again, and they're pushing and pushing and pushing. Whether Britain would be involved or not, because we're not actually part of Europe anymore, I don't know. Whether we would go in alongside the European army or whether we'd be amalgamated into the European army, I honestly don't know. But yeah, it has come back to the forefront over here, and since the fiasco out in Afghan, it has received a lot more support in the last few weeks. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting, because the army in Ezekiel 38 talks about all of these nations that are going to combine. Okay, of course, it's the ancient nations, they say, but today those nations would be Russia, Turkey, Iran, China. It would be it would be all of the stands, like we said last week, Pakistan, Afghanistan. They're going to be part of Russia when this attack on Israel happens. And now we're staring down the barrel of Europe tossing around the idea, well, we can no longer count on America now, so we need to form our own European army, which, like you said, would be a massive amounts of numbers of people, which, unless something changes with America, I'm sure they're probably going to pull the trigger on that and form a European army. They have no choice if Biden stays in office, because he's flushing us down the toilet. So if that's the case, we know that in Ezekiel 38, he covers the European region. They are known as Tarshish and the merchants of Tarshish. Now, many say that since Tarshish is a European region, the merchants of Tarshish are either the ones that buy and sell with Europe, or could that be America, since we are an offspring of the European region? I don't know, but the point is in Ezekiel 38, all of Europe is combined in this major battle. So the question is, with what Jamie has shared with us, are we starting to see now the European army form getting ready for Ezekiel 38? It's very interesting times that we live in, folks, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because I've not heard anybody report on that, and our news naturally is not reporting on that. So, wow, it's amazing to me how things are going. Now, not to change gears, but I've got to get to this, because I want to get to a few things that Biden had said in his speech this week, Jamie, because it's very important, because your nation, other nations are hearing what Biden is saying, and they no longer trust us. They no longer trust our nation or our administration. All right. So Biden comes out in this big speech, sounding all threatening. He's threatening the Americans, the American people. He's threatening the governors. And here's what he said about the governors, because we have 20 governors now that are taking a stand, claiming the state rights that's granted to them under the Constitution, stating that Biden is overstepping his bounds unconstitutionally, and they're going to govern their states via the Constitution, and Biden cannot tell these states what to do. Biden threatened those governors. How did he do it? He did it on the backs of our children. What did Hitler do? Hitler did everything that he did on the backs of the children. Listen to what Biden said.
Let me be blunt. My plan also takes on elected officials in states that are undermining you in these life-saving actions. Right now, local school officials are trying to keep children safe in a pandemic, while their governor picks a fight with them and even threatens their salaries or their jobs. Talk about bullying in schools. If they'll not help, these governors won't help us beat the pandemic. I'll use my power as president to get them out of the way. The Department of Education has already begun to take legal action against states undermining protection that local school officials have ordered. Any teacher or school official whose pay is withheld for doing the right thing, we will have that pay restored by the federal government 100%. I promise you, I will have your back.
He's going to use every weapon in his quiver to come after these governors. Did you hear that? The federal government is acting like they are a monarch. No offense, Jamie. But that's not how our nation is ran. We are run under states' rights, okay? And the federal government has no say-so on any of this. Now, listen to what Leanne Bobart had said. She found this, and listen how they're going to implement this. Okay, listen very close. Now the Constitution is considered hate speech, and the Constitution needs to be removed. Listen to this.
You tell me, have the fact checkers gone too far this time? From Lauren Boebert, the National Archives have now put a disclaimer on their website that our historical documents may include harmful content. So when I first saw that, I thought, well, there's she's been trolled and she's posted something that's incorrect, so we went to go check it out. Guess what we found? NARA, the National Archives and Records Administration, actually released a statement. The NARA statement actually claims that the Constitution and Declaration of Independence are riddled with racist and xenophobic language, and therefore it needs to have a label. And if you think that's sick, NPR, National Public Radio, has added a disclaimer for the very first time saying that the words in the document land differently after last summer's protest and our national reckoning on race. So what these leftist globalists are doing is laying the groundwork for the Constitution, the foundation of our nation, and the Declaration of Independence, the foundation of freedom on the planet. They're going to label those as hate speech.
Okay, folks, that's how they're going to do it. That's why they've been pushing all this hate speech. Delete it from Facebook. Get you accustomed to having something removed because it offends somebody or it's hate speech. And now they're going after the Constitution, folks. Now, you don't think that this is getting serious now? All right, Jamie. Are they saying anything over there in Europe about America leaving hostages over there? I mean, I know the whole world is fuming right now at what Biden's doing. Are they talking about American hostages being left over there?
I'm not sure because I've found the whole situation so upsetting to watch it. I've been trying to avoid the news. I mean, I try not to follow mainstream media anyway. I tend to rely on you and other sources to find out the facts. But having seen on, or basically, I mean, it all happened so quick, didn't it? Within hours, and I saw those poor people running down the runway after that transporter plane and trying to climb on it and falling off it, and I couldn't watch it for crying, so I've been trying not to watch the rest. I didn't even know about the drone strike until you told me earlier. You know, it's one of those things, it will get in my head and it will stay there, and I have nightmares about it, and do you know what I mean? So I'm not entirely sure what the media has been saying about it, but it's disgusting if they have been left over there. It really is.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. Well, I'm glad you brought up the drone strike. Folks, if you're unaware, yesterday or last night, it's not too long ago, supposedly, now, there was a drone strike from us, okay? But several innocent people were killed. Now, the word around the water cooler is that there were several Americans that were killed by our own drone strike. But the word from our administration is they had to do the drone strike so that they could go after certain terrorists. Okay. Why do a drone strike to come after terrorists if all you're going to do is give the terrorists weapons and just give them everything that they want? What terrorist were you going after? So the question was asked not only to Jen Psaki, but it was also asked of the press secretary for the Pentagon. And listen to his response.
There'll probably be a time when we can talk to you about the names. That's not the time right now. We are still dealing with, as we saw from last night's rocket attacks, very real, ongoing threats. And I think we're doing what we believe to be the prudent thing with respect to the release of information. We're giving you as much as we can in as close to real time as we can, but we're not going to be able to give you everything.
So they're not going to be able to give us everything, okay? The names right now aren't important, okay? They've got to hash out what has happened over there. What do you think the media would have done if Trump would have made a drone strike like that and they said, well, we're just not going to tell you who we killed and who all died, and we're not going to tell you any of that. It happened, and when the time is right, we'll just tell you. What do you think they would have done to Trump? Oh, but now the beast that's rising can come out, do drone strikes, kill whoever they want to kill, and say, you know, we're just not going to tell you who did it, or why we did it, or who we killed. We're not going to tell you any of that. And it's like, I mean, this is everywhere. Check this out.
Significant secondary explosions from the targeted vehicle indicated the presence of a substantial amount of explosive material. We are aware of reports of civilian casualties, and we take these reports very seriously, and we are continuing to assess the situation.
We take steps from the United States to avoid civilian casualties in every scenario, and probably more than almost any country in the world. I can't speak to or confirm the numbers or cases of civilian casualties in this case.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know the number of casualties. I don't know anything. Don't worry about it. It happened. And tomorrow we're going to move on. So, Jamie, I mean, being over there in Europe and seeing this type of activity, after seeing how they just brutalized Trump, if he didn't give them every grain of sand of what he has done, how does that make y'all think?
Well, I know if it had been Trump that had done that, they would have hung him out to dry. But Biden seems to be able to get away with it. It's like, it's Biden, so we'll forgive him. It doesn't matter. We'll brush it under the carpet. Ho hum. But they would have fed Trump to the wolves if he'd been in charge when that happened. So I guess his face just didn't fit. Well, they never expected him to get in, did they? Back in 2016, they thought Hillary was going to get in.
Yep.
And they spent 4 years falling over their own feet trying to get rid of him. So, every single thing that would have happened, they would have really ripped him up about it. But now they've got the Liberals back in, which is what they wanted. It's like brush everything under the carpet. That didn't happen, as you said just now. And poor old Joe, we won't make a big issue out of that. So obviously Joe Biden's face fits, and Trump's never did it?
No, no, it sure didn't. And the big thing was how many Americans were left behind. How they're not caring about the Americans. And we had 6 planes that were sitting on the tarmac. And it had Germans, Europeans, it had Afghans on it, but it also had Americans. And it's been sitting on a runway for something like, 8 or 10 days now, and not a mention of they're being held hostage. We have Americans being held hostage. And when you bring it up or post it on Facebook, it gets deleted. Was this a faux pas? Was this a slip-up? A reporter asked Jen Psaki about having hostages. She admitted to it. Listen.
On these charter flights that the Taliban is holding up in Afghanistan, the Secretary of State said there are limits to what we can do without personnel on the ground.
Yeah.
You just said we are not on the ground.
You're right.
Whose fault is that?
I don't think this is about fault here.
Let me play that again. Listen close. He said that we have hostages there. We have, blah, blah, blah. And she admitted to it. Listen.
On these charter flights that the Taliban is holding up in Afghanistan, the Secretary of State said there are limits to what we can do without personnel on the ground.
Yeah.
You just said we are not on the ground.
You're right.
Whose fault is that?
I don't think this is about fault here.
It ain't about fault. Yeah. Okay, so we have hostages in a plane. Yeah, we have hostages in the plane. But you don't have anybody on the ground. No. Well, whose fault is that? I don't know. I don't care. If Trump would have done something like that, oh, man. The liberals would have melted down, wouldn't they, girl?
They would, yeah. It would have really have hit the fan big time if Trump had done anything like that. But from what you were saying about they were covering up about the hostages out in Afghan, although, as I say, I didn't see anything on the news because I try not to watch it, I doubt if it would have been mentioned, to be honest. Because I've noticed the British government and the British media is very pro-Liberal, very pro-Biden. So I think we'd have been following America's lead and hushing it up. So I doubt very much if it would have been on the news. So no, they're just trying to big Biden up after trouncing Trump, supposedly, and getting rid of him. Now they're just trying to big Biden up all the time, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yep, they sure are. Well, folks, if y'all know, Kamala Harris, we know she went on a journey over in Asia. She went to Singapore. She went to Vietnam. Was this a message? Okay, we played a clip. I wish I would have saved it, but I didn't. But it was a montage of different clips that Biden had said through the presidential campaign and some of his speeches as president. But basically it said, we're going to be going into a dark winter. I don't care if you think I am Satan himself. If you remember those clips that we shared back then, Dark Winter, we see how he's just been lying. We know the devil is a liar, and Biden has just been lying. So has Kamala Harris. But anyway, she went on her little tour, Singapore and Asia and all that. And folks, do you realize she went to Vietnam and she laid flowers down on the enemy's grave to honor the North Vietnamese? Let me rephrase that. She was a Jane Fonda, okay? She goes to North Vietnam, where the enemy was that we were fighting, and she lays flowers and pays homage to the enemy. And it's like, what? I mean, did nothing different than Jane Fonda did. And the excuse was, when people started coming out and saying, oh, well, the reason she did that was because that's where John McCain was shot down. And what she was really doing was paying homage to John McCain's efforts. Well, then why don't you lay the flowers down on John McCain's grave if you're going to do that? Why do you go to the communist enemy and lay the flowers and pay your homage to those? Okay, so Jamie, when we see things like this, we are to be awake and recognize they are openly showing us who they are and who they serve. Are they not?
Yeah, it seems that way. It's like they're just, I don't quite know how to put this politely, but in England, your version of, our version of your flipping the bird is the V for victory reverse sign. And it's almost like they're sticking two fingers up at God and, goodness and, they're just flaunting evil in your face, really. That's how it seems to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. And we know the Lord has got it set up that they have to tell us what they're going to do. They have to show us who they are. It's just we have to be awake to see it, and it's in our face now. Not only that, Jamie, but Biden has set up a consulate in East Jerusalem, or he's in the process of setting up and opening up the consulate in East Jerusalem for the Palestinians. So what this means, folks, there's going to be a division now of Jerusalem, and we know what the Word of God says about dividing the land of Israel, and now Biden is setting up a consulate in East Jerusalem. He's separating East Jerusalem to give it to the Palestinians. America is going to pay, and pay righteously, for touching the apple of God's eye, folks. I'm telling you, get ready for it. I don't know how it's going to come, but it's going to come. And also, one more thing before we move to 9/11. Do you know that in 1941, September the 11th, 1941 is when they broke ground and they began construction on the Pentagon? 1941. And then we moved to 2001, 60 years later. And that Pentagon was struck during the terrorist attack on 9/11, and it was the area that was handling a lot of the money that Donald Rumsfeld had come out the day before and said that they were missing. That area of the Pentagon was what was struck. And so it's interesting. Okay, Jamie, so you and I were talking earlier. We all know what we were doing and how we felt 2001, 1911, okay? Or excuse me, 9/11, 2001. But I was listening to Brother Terry on Greg Gutfeld yesterday, and Gutfeld was going around to everybody asking them where they were on September the 11th and how they felt. And Terry had an interesting response. He said, I don't care where people were on 9/11. He said, I don't care what they were doing on 9/11. He said, what I care about is how did they feel and what did they do on 9/12? You know, this nation, since I would say World War II, 9/11 in this nation, Jamie, we were as tight as a drum. You were not black. You were not Latino. You were not gay. You were not anything. You were an American, and we were bonded brothers and sisters. This was the strongest this nation had been probably since the war. And now look, just a mere 20 years later, how divided that we are. So, Jamie, tell us about Europe, man. How did it affect you over there?
Well, we lost 300 people in those towers. So, yeah, it really hit us hard as well. But I'd been out, I'd been shopping, and I came in, put the telly on just to catch up on the news while I made a cup of tea and had a very late lunch. And the cameras were on New York, and there was just smoke coming out of the towers, and I'm like, oh, what's going on here, kind of thing. And it was all very sketchy. The reporter on the ground and the newsreader in London, the news anchor, were discussing it, and I'm like, okay, a plane's hit one of the Twin Towers, and I'm like, oh God, don't be stupid. How can a plane hit something that high? As the pilot was asleep, his guide dog was flying the plane. I don't know what's going on here. And then the next thing you know, the other plane hits the other tower, and I'm like, okay. And it was just like, you couldn't believe what you were watching. It was like watching a horror film or something. And this would have been just after 2:00 London time. And then there were the people coming out of the towers, trying to get out of the towers, going down the stairs. And then one of the towers collapses, and total chaos. And they were showing it all over, I presume all over Europe, all over Britain anyway. And I was just sat there, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. And the people jumping out of the windows, and yeah, I don't know, you can't even put it into words, can you? There are some things you can never unsee, and there are some things you can never unknow or unhear. It's going to be in your memory forever. And I remember just sitting there, tears streaming down my face. And later on that night, when it got dark and the fires, they eventually burnt for 3 months, I remember, but the fires, you could see them burning because it was dark. And the firefighters, they were talking to police and firefighters, and they were in tears. And you don't expect a huge, great firefighter he's over 6 foot tall and he's built like a chicken house. You don't expect those guys to break down and cry. And I was just sat there watching these guys in tears. And then the news anchor on the scene in New York, she was crying. And nobody could believe what was happening. We were staring at the screen, just completely dumbfounded. And I remember I went out into my street just because I just felt the need to connect with somebody, I felt like I was kind of in a bubble and none of it was real. And people were coming out into their front gardens and coming out onto the road, onto the pavement, and we were all gathering in little groups. Like, did you just see what I just saw? Is that real? Did that really happen? And just kind of chewing it over and going over and over and over what we'd already seen, simply because we couldn't believe what we'd just seen, and trying to actually make sense out of it. But yeah, having lost 300 people, it might not sound many compared to 4,000, but it was, it was a lot from a little country like ours, like mine. And the next day I went shopping, and the local mall not only had armed police outside all of its stores, it had the army there, soldiers with whatever automatic machine guns they carry. I don't know if it's Uzis or Kalashnikovs or what it is. But, I live in a suburban area. I don't live in downtown. The sights we saw the next day are not the kind of thing you would expect to see in suburbia. You don't expect to see the SWAT squads, the SWAT teams outside in your local shopping mall. You don't expect to see the army in your local shopping mall. They were checking everything and everyone. And it was scary. That really brought it home to us because we don't live normally in that kind of environment. It's not, downtown is always going to be dodgy. But the suburbs, you don't see that kind of thing. Over here in England, it's considered a fairly safe place to live. So, you're going into like Asda, which is our version of your Walmart, and there's armed police and there's soldiers searching everyone who goes in. And I think that was what brought it home to us. It hadn't really seemed all that real before. It was just too big to be real. You couldn't fathom it. You couldn't get your head around it. And then seeing the armed police and the army, the soldiers on duty outside the grocery stores the next day, in what is your typical suburban English town, you can't get a much safer place to live. And then it was like, oh, bleep, this is actually real. This has happened. And I remember seeing people bursting into tears in the shop because of the shock of seeing the army there patrolling. We knew that they were there to protect us, but because it's something you don't expect to see, it was a shock to the system, and it really drove it home to us that this atrocity the day before had actually happened, because until then it just felt like a nightmare, like a bad dream. It was horrible.
Well, how was the people of Europe as far as the citizens? Had they come together just like we did here in America?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can't speak for Europe. I don't know. I assume they did the same over there. I mean, the whole world, I think, was united. I remember even seeing Yasser Arafat in tears. And that's something I never thought I'd see. But here in Britain, yeah, it was all people were talking about. And, you'd be in the mall, or you'd be in a bar, or you'd be wherever, and people would be talking about it, and other people would like gravitate towards that group of people and joining in the conversation, and people would hug each other, and nobody knew how to deal with it because nothing that big had happened. I think the last thing that brought out that kind of emotion in people over here was when Princess Diana was killed. We hadn't had that kind of outpouring of shock and grief in, what was it, 97, I think she was killed. So you're talking like 5 years. It wasn't that long before that she died. But yeah, people just needed to try and make sense of it. They needed to talk about it, and groups of people were getting together, and somebody would maybe start crying and the others would hug them, and in the mall or the pub or whatever it was. But there was only one topic of conversation. Nobody could believe what was happening. But there was a sense of total outrage, of fear. We didn't know what was going to happen next. We immediately started thinking about the skyscrapers in London. We've got some pretty tall buildings in London now in the financial sector. Our terror threat was up to red, or double red, I think it was. Threat imminent. And, I'm repeating myself, but it was just complete shock and disbelief, and that did pull people together because you felt the need to connect with other people, just to feel a sense of normalcy again, or normality again, and trying to put your feelings into words. You'd maybe strike up a conversation with a total stranger if you're waiting in the checkout line at the grocery store. You might turn around and smile at them and start talking to them just to try and connect with other people. It's about the only way we learned we could cope with it.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And God allows things like this to happen to bring us to a place of repentance, to turn to Him. When atrocities and catastrophic events happen, that opportunity has been given for us to understand that God is the only way. He's the only one that can guide us through this. And although there's evil that is of this world, in this world, there's evil here. If we do not obey the commandments of God, He's gonna remove some hedges. He did it to Job, and He's gonna remove some hedges and allow evil to persevere, to bring us to that solemn moment where we do nothing but turn to him. And Jamie, I thank you for all that, especially how you had mentioned shock and grief. That term that you said, that it was just shock and grief. We ask ourselves, is this going to be all? Because now with the vaccine and all of the junk that's happening with COVID, it's turned people against each other. There is a great division 20 years after 9/11, and it's happening over in Europe. It's happening globally, this divide and conquer. And I was shown something this week, and I don't know how this is going to affect y'all over there in England, but I'm sure it will if this is the case. Now, I know, folks, we've been hearing people saying, we're going to run out of money in the U.S. and the economy is going to collapse. And I've never really put much stock into that. I've shared it when the message has been out there, just to let you know that's what's being said. But we don't necessarily see an economic collapse. All right. Now it's different. Now we have got money being thrown everywhere. Okay. The government now is just throwing money everywhere. They have taken all this money and paid people for over a year to stay home and not work. We've got money now being taken by the Democrats, being stolen from us for this new Green Deal junk that they're pushing. Money now is going back to the Paris Climate Accord. They're going to be probably revamping the TPP contract, the UN agreement where all nations will operate under the laws of the UN. And in that is a small arms ban treaty, which if our government attaches us to the UN, they're going to just totally throw the Constitution out, and we will no longer be able to have small arms under this treaty. They can take our guns, or try anyway. But my point is, all this money now, folks, we can now see it's just being thrown away. We're seeing food shortages. The shelves are going dry. It's hard to get material. Freight's running slow. We're starting to see the evidence that, yeah, man. Well, Janet Yellen, who is the Secretary of Treasury here, she wrote a letter to Congress. Now, take it with a grain of salt, but I'm just going to tell you, some people basically it's like this. We're concerned about our national debt and how it's going to affect our children or our grandchildren, right? It's a bad thought, but things are worse than we might think that they are, because it's about to get very ugly. Because according to Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, the nation will be flat broke in October. And October meaning as in next month. If Congress does not increase the debt ceiling, the country will not be able to service the debt. And Yellen said Wednesday in a letter to Congress that the Secretary noted that there's a severe threat to the economy. And once all available measures and cash on hand are fully exhausted, the United States of America would be unable to meet its obligations for the first time in our history. When the Treasury Secretary fully writes out United States of America in a letter to Congress, it's like your mother sharply addressing you by your first, middle, and last name. This is serious, folks. As the Secretary in her letter, based on our best and most recent information, the most likely outcome is that crash and extraordinary measures will be exhausted during the month of October. Earlier instances of the congressional raising of the debt ceiling have taken time, Yellen said, and delaying now could cause serious harm to businesses, consumers, confidence, raise short-term borrowing costs for taxpayers, and negatively impact the credit rating of the United States. A delay that calls into question the federal government's ability to meet all its obligations would likely cause irreparable damage to the United States economy and the global finance market, she said. So, yes, this would affect you, Jamie. Basically, it goes on and on. I'm not going to share the whole thing here. It's a pretty lengthy article. But in closing, Basically, it says, presumably, there will be some tap dancing, maneuvering, horse trading, and other dark things. It's interesting they use the word dark. Other dark things going on in Washington, so that somehow in October there will be a way to keep the lights on. We hope. But with the government's craziness and its handling of COVID-19, the growing inflation, employers begging for workers, and the obscenity that is the abandonment of Americans and allies in Afghanistan, one more problem joins the list of this national misery. No more money in October. So, Jamie, there's one thing about it. Right now, everybody is all divided over COVID and all of this. Y'all over in England, y'all are divided by the same thing, the vaxxed and the unvaxxed. There is division due to this all over the world. It's almost like they use this COVID to totally divide, because we know a house divided amongst itself cannot stand. It's the word of God. They've got their division now, and they need the cataclysmic event to unfold, just like 9/11, to usher in, because that's what they did with 9/11. They ushered in all their draconian laws, the search at the airports of innocent people. We lost a lot of rights then. Point being is this going to happen? And will this be the cataclysmic event that's going to hit America, but it is going to cause problems globally, even into the UK? And one thing about it, Jamie, there's this division. Everybody's divided. But if everybody loses their money, we're all going to be in the same boat. We're all going to be equal. So could this, I'm just asking your opinion, could this be a serious thing that's about to happen? And God may remove some hedges to allow it to happen, to bring us down to humility, down to our knees, down to submission, so that we will realize we only have Him to rely on. So what say you?
I'm not sure if it's going to be another financial collapse. I mean, we survived the collapse from 2008 to 9. I say we did survive it. A lot of our big stores went down. A lot of our economy crashed right out. There was chain stores that have been going for a couple of 100 years, which had to close their doors. They couldn't survive anymore. I mean, Woolworths, FW Woolworth, I think, started in America. It was a huge chain over here for over 100 years. That went down the pan, as did a lot of our other big stores. But we managed to survive that, and I don't think something like that would divide or pull together the nation. I think everybody would be, they'd all be scrabbling around trying to survive and probably thinking only of themselves. I suppose that might divide more than pull together. But I was wondering if it was going to be some sort of actual physical event, some sort of weather phenomenon, or getting back to the Anunnaki and Atlantis story earlier, the planet Nibiru, which again is another thing that nobody can agree on whether it really exists or not, but that does a 3,600 year orbit, and if it exists, it is very close to Earth. The time scale, the cycle would put it very, very close to Earth at the moment. That again is the home of the Anunnaki, which some say are the fallen angels, and with the devil taking over the world now, and he will presumably bring a lot of his own army in, as in demons. I'm wondering, Nibiru, they reckon caused the last pole shift, which you can imagine the catastrophic effect, physical effect that would have on the planet. Tsunami and earthquakes and volcanoes and what have you, which again could account for Atlantis rising, simply because the shift of the water mass would make it appear as if certain land masses had risen. So no, I'm wondering if it's going to be some sort of physical event, either caused by a natural phenomenon like the weather, or caused by the devil, the Anunnaki coming back, the fallen angels, the demons, call them what you will, or by CERN, something happening at CERN. Or you've got HAARP that can cause the weather now, I think. They can fake the weather anywhere they want it to be. They can cause droughts and floods and what have you. Well, I don't know. I have a feeling it's going to be something something more physical than financial. Maybe earthquakes. I know that Mike was saying that there's a caldera under New York. I mean, you imagine if that opened up, New York just wouldn't exist anymore. Or you've got the big one, as they call it, in California. And I mean, obviously, if something happened on the east coast of the States, it would affect Britain and Europe, because the massive tsunami that would cause, it would just sweep straight across the Atlantic, and Europe and England and Britain would not exist anymore. Mike was on about a water event. I mean, yeah, maybe it's something like that. I mean, that certainly would bring people together in a lot of ways. People would immediately forget. There wouldn't be any of this, oh, you can't get on this lifeboat because you're not vaccinated. You know, everybody, hopefully, would be pulling together if there were any survivors. But I don't know. I don't think it'd be financial. I think it will literally be something physical, but I've got no idea what. It'd be interesting to see what Mike has to say about that.
Yep, yeah, and he does kind of go into a little bit better detail, which we'll get to that in just a moment. Folks, when I play this clip, it's going to take us into 8:30 instead of 8 o'clock, and so if you run out of time and can't listen, you're more than welcome to come back and listen to the parts you missed in the archives. But you're right, Jamie. It could be a host of calamities all at one time. From what Mike has to say, with the meteorites that are coming in, that'll be starting fires on this dry, parched land. It could be that, along with all these other things. And who knows? Maybe Nibiru has been placed out into the news and into our minds to deceive us, because these global elites know that this is all coming, so they're going to go ahead and let everything collapse, so that we will crawl and gravel and look toward the government, so that they can then take full control over us. Of course, we as Christians know we need to turn to God, but I agree with you. They could use this Nibiru as maybe when they bring back the fallen ones. Just use that as an excuse. Oh, well, that's where they lived, and they just came back around, and now, as bad as society is, they're here to help us. So, you need to listen to them. We don't need to be tempted, and we do not need to be deceived. And I'd like to thank Miss Shelby, who is a avid listener of the program, because I didn't really feel that there was a piece missing in the show tonight until she had sent me one of her favorite Bible verses, and I'm like, man, this fits like a glove with everything that we are going to be talking about tonight. And it's James 1, verse 12. It's her favorite verse. And it says, "Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord hath promised to him that love him." And I'm going to go on a little further. Verse 13 says, "Let no man say when he is tempted that I am tempted of God, for God cannot tempt with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed." So, folks, God is not going to send anything evil to us. He's not going to purposely tempt you, because he does not tempt. He's an open, loving God. But by reading this, we have to understand, with the things that Jamie and I have shared tonight, and what Paul is going to share with you later, or Mike, folks, there is going to be coming massive temptation like we have never seen. Evil is going to be coming our way like we have never seen. So when it falls upon us, whether you're here or in Europe or wherever you're listening, when evil comes to us, God did not send it. Now, he will remove the hedges if we are not focused on him. If we are not obeying his commandments, he will remove some hedges, and then the evil that's already here will come in. But God's not doing this. We are doing it to ourselves because we are not obeying God's commandments. And I'd like to clarify something last week, Jamie, real quick, that I had spoken about. in regards to this COVID and me getting the disease. I didn't want to mislead anyone, so I want to correct it here on the show tonight. But what I had said is that I didn't feel that I was doing what was right, and that I wasn't hiding under the wing of the Almighty, and that's why God allowed me to or gave me this disease. And that's not what I meant to say. So if I misleaded anybody or misled anyone, I want to apologize. What I was paraphrasing was 2 Chronicles 7:13. We know what 7:14 says, but I was quoting 7:13, which basically says that. Well, I thought I had it right here. Hold on just a second. Well, okay. Hang on just a second. Let me do it this way. Jamie, help us out. Fill us in a little bit. Hate to put you on the spot, but
yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, getting back to what I was just saying about whatever might happen this autumn, or this fall, as you would call it. Whatever it is, it's going to have to be big enough that the general populace is going to be looking to their leaders for guidance. You know, I mean, a lot of the governments have fallen foul of the people of not just England, Britain, the States, Europe, Australia, everywhere, simply because of the COVID vax v anti-vax and this is going to be made mandatory, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. You know, a lot of people are not very keen on their government, on their elected officials at the moment. And if something really, really bad worldwide happens, those same officials who are now not popular at all are suddenly going to be like, oh, yeah, okay, tell us what to do. You know, they're going to be back in favour. What do we do? What do we do? You know, the general public will be, you know, Mr. Biden, tell us what to do. Or over here, Mr. Johnson, tell us what to do. Mr. Macron, Mrs. Merkel. We're going to be, I say we, the general populace is going to be looking to its leaders, its national leaders, to tell us what to do to help us out. So, you know, I think you might be right. They might engineer some sort of crisis just to get themselves back in favour with their people. You know, they're well out of favour. Most world leaders are well out of favour at the moment with their populations, and it will take something pretty big, and then people are just straight away going to be, okay, leader, tell us what to do. So yeah, I think you might well be right there. It will give them the chance to regain the good favour of their voters or their populace again.
Oh yeah, yeah. You've got a valid point there, because this is what they're going to do. As it gets worse, they're going to start ushering the crowd to look to them and bow to them for help instead of bowing to God. Good point. And what I was referencing last week was 2 Chronicles 7:13, where God had said, if I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain, or if I command the locust to devour the land, or if I send pestilence among my people, if my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. And so pestilence is here. Pestilence, this disease is made from the devil, but it's on the land and it's in the land. And if we do not, just like God said here, okay, if we do not humble ourselves, pray, seek his face, turn from our wicked ways, repent of our sins, God will remove the hedges around us, folks, and we're going to fall on hardship. And the further we drift from God, the more he's going to discipline us. And he tells us, do not despise the discipline of the Almighty, for he wounds, but he also binds up. And so these days that we're seeing ahead of us, don't look to Biden. Don't look to your government. You know, yeah, you might lose your job if you refuse this shot, but man, the government's already proved they're not going to help you. Okay, so start turning to God. Start looking to God, folks. This is what this is all about. We've got hard days coming, and if we do not turn to God now, we're not going to make it through. So before we start the clip, and I'll go ahead and turn you loose before I start the clip, Jamie, because it's going to run a full hour, and like I said, it's going to run about 30 minutes over, folks. I apologize, but I've enjoyed this. We've been rolling good, Jamie, and I wanted to keep you on here. So, okay, any last words before we go to the clip?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything, but I did want to say that, for one, it's, from my point of view, and I'm sure the rest of the listeners and your friends on Facebook, it's really good to have you back, because we were worried about you a couple of weeks ago. So it's great that you're back, and I know you're not quite up to full strength yet, but you're getting there. So God willing, and as you say, the creeks don't rise, you'll get stronger and stronger every day. And I know it's the amount of work you put into the show when you're not feeling 100%. We really appreciate the extra effort it's taking you. I know it's taking it out of you a lot. So thank you for being there, and thank you for what you do. And I'm sure we all appreciate it. And just keep up the good work as long as you can. And you do have a dedicated band of listeners out here. And I hope that if there is any way we can support you and keep you on the right track and keep your spirits up, then I hope we actually can do that for you.
Well, I greatly appreciate it, and I'm honored. I was in bad shape, and I know you and several others are like, man, you haven't posted anything. We hadn't heard from you. What's going on? But my mind was just so chaotic that I noticed I had sent a text I didn't realize I had sent at one point, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to touch anything because I don't want to accidentally send somebody something that my mind's not knowing what I'm saying, and so I do apologize for that. But listen, girl, I greatly appreciate you being here tonight. This was an awesome broadcast, and glad you could be a part from across the pond. Everything held in good, and you stayed in there solid. So, man, we've seen you grow through the years. It's been an amazing journey, and I'm pleased to walk it with you.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me back on the show. It's a privilege and an honour to be here and to connect up again with the listeners. I know I had some great feedback last time, some really kind words said about. I was nervous last time. I won't deny it, and I never realised I said the words quite so often, nearly at the end of every sentence, because I was nervous. It was like yabby yabby yabby, I'm like, I heard the playback and I'm like, oh no, I didn't realise I said that quite so much. But hopefully I didn't sound quite such a muppet this time. I didn't feel quite so nervous this time. But anyway, thank you to everyone who wrote nice things about me and who wanted me to come back again. I'm very grateful to have been invited back, and I hope you've enjoyed the show. And I didn't actually realise until I connected up with Greg and did this show and the last show just how much work there is to put the show on. I know nothing about recording studios and radio shows, what actually goes into it. And it's not until Greg went into this does this does that, so and so and so and so, and you realise just how much hard work it is and how much effort is put into it to make it. It's a 2-hour show. And the amount of work that goes into a 2-hour show is phenomenal. So, thank you, Greg, for what you do. And I know it's difficult enough fitting it in with your driving job and the trucking job. And even when you're feeling well, it's a lot of work for you to do on a Saturday. So, in fact, you're not quite feeling 100% at the moment. It's we're more than grateful for you being there. And fingers crossed that if your company does let you go because of the mandatory vaccine, I hope you can find another job with another smaller company, and I'm sure God will provide a way. He obviously wants you to be out there being the watchman and talking to us every Saturday night worldwide, so I'm sure he'll put something in your path that you can use. I don't think he'll let you down.
Nope, I know he won't, because I've got proof in several things in my life, and he's had me down in the sewers for so long, I'm used to it. So, even if I have to go back down there, I'm prepared and I'm ready. He kind of bases our life to prepare us for what we're about to engage. So all my faith and my sight is on him, and we worry not. So y'all do the same, folks. And Sister Jamie, it's been an absolute pleasure. and we will definitely have to do this again. All righty?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you very much. Say hello to everyone, your mum and dad and Miranda and everybody else that I've been chatting to today. It's been great.
All right. Yeah, I enjoyed it. That was kind of neat. So you can listen to the interview on whatever server you listen to it on over there, because I'll have to kill this feed. But Sister Jamie, I enjoyed it, and you take care over there in England, and we'll catch you later.
Okay, you take care, everyone. Goodbye then.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
And that was Sister Jamie. That was an awesome show, folks. Here we go. Mike talking to Paul.
All right, Mike, we got a lot to talk about tonight, but let's start with this 3 asteroids scraping by. I got a haircut, Mike, today. I got a haircut because 2 of them last night and 1 tonight. One last night missed us by 0.1 lunar distance, or less than 20,000 miles. 1 missed us by 0.3. And tonight, one's going to miss us by 0.5. So, Mike, what's going on here? I mean, how close is it going to get here? We're going to get hit, aren't we?
Yeah, sooner or later, we're going to get a bunch of small biscuit-sized little deals smacking into us. And you got to remember something, objects the size of Volkswagens. They normally penetrate our atmosphere in very strange ways frequently, but most of these asteroids hit the ocean. From the size of cantaloupes to a Volkswagen. They do that. Not quite the size. Now the one's the size of the one that exploded in Russia, right?
Yeah.
That was that was a pretty hefty one.
Yeah.
The shockwave damage is what a lot of people are going to have to entertain soon enough. But there are indicators for this, because we have a real development happening, and so that's going to be a precursor to quite a few things that will well, like I said before, you won't have to explain too much to anybody. They're going to be asking for an explanation as to why certain things are happening and what does this mean or that mean, especially the dust event we have coming. It's on the way, and that's a continual buildup.
When you mentioned that before, and I just saw this week that this red dust is starting to really become a problem here on the Earth. It's a red dust, and you mentioned this like several years ago, and you said, Paul, there's a day coming that we're going to have to all walk around with gas masks, not those little masks that we've been wearing, but gas masks. And now we're hearing this red dust is really, really starting to filter into our atmosphere. Can you tell us about it?
Well, one day it's going to be like this, kind of normal, right? Because you think it'd be a gradual buildup. No, it's not going to be gradual. It's going to be almost overnight. So it'll be bad. That will poison the waters. That will really affect the waters deeply. Not only that, but it will also begin to destroy crops even more. Animals, they're going to be real sick from that stuff. That's iron arsenic based.
Arsenic?
Yeah, it's a lot of arsenic in space, and normally arsenic will come down with some of these meteorites and comet trails they're laden with arsenic as they hit the suns. When they heat up by the sun, the gases that are emitted, a lot of those gases are just laden with arsenic. So we have to deal with that. That's coming along the way. This same thing that we're going through right now was recorded in over 168 different cultures in times past. And all 168 being in various locations around the earth tell the exact same story. The exact same story. A few of those cultures, about 20 of them, tell of a time before them when that same thing happened. A cyclical event that's coming around again. They had a hard time believing it back then, Pastor Paul. Archaeologists, as they dig more and more, they find more and more. They go back in time more and more and dig up more things. They're finding quite a few things that they frighten leadership. They frighten quite a few people. It's going to alter. It has altered the ways that governments operate. It influences them largely. For example, you know those figurines they dig up all over the planet?
Yep.
The weird ones, like you'll have little tiny lizard figurines.
Yeah, what's that about?
Dog priest figurines.
What's
and
that?
These are ancient.
Yeah.
Well, after this last calamity, as they were going through another dating method, a story has emerged, something a little different than anything that's out there on the internet. Something different than what people may be comfortable with, but these figurines were made after the calamity. They're also found near scrolls, etchings in rock that contain iconography and other languages. And they were telling the cultures that were coming after them, the generations, their children and children's children. Those are messages. Here's what happens. Close to these calamities, there's an uncovering event. And this is where people are known for what they really are, right? These figurines represent what was unveiled during the time of great calamity. You have to remember something, when these calamities happened, people fell apart. There were no courageous people at all out there with these events. And so after they were over, given the, just the decimation of the human population in various places, they built structures. They tried to tell us. They wanted the information to get down to us to let us know this is what you're facing. Those figurines and some of the artifacts that these guys are gathering are them telling us these are the things that were involved the entire time. For example, if you ever see some type of a reptile, and they specifically are with a child or feeding a child, that's a message. And what that message is these things in our society, we call them demons, you can call them demons, but they're in our society feeding their young, right, with us, by us. They feed their young by us, not physically eating us, no, not that, but by corrupting our way of life. They feed themselves and they feed their children. And come to find out, these calamities, they blamed it on them. They said they corrupted humanity 4 or 5 times so bad that the Creator, all of them, admitted. In fact, it's so funny because they recently dug up some Mayan artifacts that threw all their gods out of the window. And they said, nope, there's a one true God. But we were deceived. They actually deciphered and found this repetitious statement through all these societies, and they admitted they were deceived. And so they passed down to their children various stories, which also were, they were confused over time because people operate by ego and greed and these things, and they changed the narrative. The original narrative was that children, you're going to have to deal with this again. Children, these things are in your society, and they are causing your corruption, which is bringing all this down on your heads.
Wait a minute.
And
Now,
it will surely happen again.
So, in other words, we're going to have a repeat of a reptilian manipulation or demonic manipulation, would you say?
I would say more like demonic, because some of these figurines, although you find reptiles, the majority of the figurines were not reptile. The majority of the figurines were human bodies mixed with animal heads, chimeras, I guess you could say. And they were all over these things are found all over the world.
Skinwalkers?
All over the world.
Skinwalkers? Skinwalkers, Mike?
No, you know what? They're actually Nephilim. If you go back to Genesis 6, and you already know the narrative, but these fallen angels were twisted in their mind. They don't think like us, number one.
Right.
They don't think in terms of good and evil like we do. They don't. And so what they did, though, in Genesis 6 was they corrupted animals also. That's in the Bible. Not only did they corrupt humanity, but they also corrupted all flesh upon the earth. And that word corrupt, that word indicates they changed or altered something in it from its original form. That's what corruption was. Corruption was when, if you corrupt something flesh-wise and spiritual-wise, it becomes highly aggressive. In fact, they do it today. In today's society, there are highly aggressive people, and you would think they would go to jail, right? Wrong, they don't. You find a lot of these people in high-security military prisons. Why? Why would a civilian go to a high-security military prison? Why would they do that? Why do they disappear from your inmate lists and all these other things, right? So you're dealing with a very real element that you could say they hide in the flesh, just like you and I, right? But their spirits are different, which are made manifest right before these, the time comes. They also reported an incursion of, they call them sky beings. Most of the words equate to sky beings. If you see, I know a lot of people, they won't agree with this, but it's kind of too bad on this one. If you ever see a winged disc, that's not a satellite. That's not what that is. That winged disc all over the earth, that same, the wings with the disc on it, and that represents something coming from space.
Is that, yeah, I was going to say, is that some kind of, is that?
It means it's pointing, it actually points to the sun. And if people would line out all of their findings, they would understand that the sun is very significant, not for the reasons we think, but because it was more like a gate. It was more like a door, I guess you could say, which is where these things were coming from, where they were reported from coming from.
Another dimension? Are they coming from another dimension?
Well, here's something behind this. They said they were coming from the sun. Something interesting. Most of the asteroids we track, all of the asteroids we track, right? We have to wait until the sun is in position with the Earth where we can see the asteroids opposite the sun. If any asteroid comes with the sun facing us, no optics can pick it up. Do you know that?
No, I did not know that. No, I did not.
Because the sun's brilliance, right? It just cancels that out. You cannot see it. So anything sun facing can come to us and we cannot see it. It could be a whole planet out there. And if it's right there parked in front of the sun, we cannot see it. Not until it moves. Not until if it matches our orbit, right? It's going to be hidden for a long time until its orbit changes. So sun-facing objects, and all these other satellites up there, they cannot see these objects up there, which is why they launched. They have this Helios program where they're trying to position satellites to the south and north of the sun, where we can see things from the base of our solar system and the top of our solar system, which is incredibly difficult because of inertia, because of orbiting, because of fuel, and all these other aspects. You have to position these things, and they have to be in motion on a continuous basis to keep their position, which is incredibly expensive. And for the most part, a lot of those missions have failed. So these ancients said that these things came from the sun. Isn't it interesting? We can't see anything arriving if it's right there.
Yeah, and Planet X, I mean, Mike, I hate to interrupt you here, but Planet X is supposedly, from information we're getting, is coming from the backside of the sun. It's hard to see. We did some research on Jeremiah Stitchin, what he thinks, and Emmanuel Velikovsky, I know, and then you got NASA's Mike Brown and Sebastian and some of these others. And, you have brought it to our realization that there is a binary system coming, a Planet X, if you will. And can we talk about that a minute? Because when we looked at here about the meteor storm on the way that you've brought up and we've heard about it, and we had two asteroids just barely missing us, Mike, yesterday. One more tomorrow, yesterday and today. so unbelievably close. 0.1 lunar distance, 0.3 lunar distance, 0.5 lunar distance. These were not on the NASA chart. Yesterday, they weren't there in the morning. But by the afternoon, 2 of them just barely missed us. Now, they were 3 and 4 and 7 meters in size because it means they're too small to probably see till they're up on us. But is this the beginning of the meteor storm?
Yeah, when they're small like that, Pastor Paul, there's a bigger object that
Coming?
they normally come from, right?
Ooh.
In every single case, when we have these small objects, it passes. And they do every single day this happens. But they always track a larger object with a similar orbit. One of the issues is when you're dealing with these small objects, they don't travel by themselves like that. They come from larger objects, right?
Yep.
And if they fly into the asteroid belt and dislodge things, that's when interesting things happen. So they always come and slam us. What's happening is we have a buildup of these things happening where it's going to start to overwhelm. It'll just totally overwhelm the news. Fires, people ought to get used to fires because there's no way they're going to put all the fires out that are about to be started from all these incursions into our atmosphere. Expect aerial bursts. That means shock waves from the sky. My advice is if you see a streak of light and it's incredibly bright, turn your head away from all glass and everything else because a shock wave is going to follow it. And people are going to have to do that. Now, I hate to tell people this, but that's going to cause death, right? These, in fact, Pastor Paul, I would say that we have moved from that era of gathering information into the time where death is going to be caused on a big scale, on a large scale. Not only by war, right? Because, we had Pakistan folding our checks and balances on their nuclear arsenal. Well, the relations are breaking down in the Middle East by force. Right now, as we speak, there's a problem developing there. There are too many radicals over here in the U.S. We have a deadlocked governmental system, right?
Yep.
So either the people stand up and begin to unify with themselves, leave the government at odds where they're at, but the people need to make the change now, or change will not be. If the people don't make the change, if they don't unify and come together before it's too late.
Do they trust, but do they trust the electoral,
problems.
when you say change, Mike, do they trust the electoral process? Or are they going to need to go beyond that?
Yeah, they're fighting too much. There's too much distrust. And once you break trust, right, it takes a national calamity to bring people back together again. So if civilians don't get together, right, if they don't begin to get together and say, listen, we are the United States of America, let's do the right thing, right? Not the political thing, but the right thing. We got to remember we have children right here in this land. We can't stay in that foolish argument forever because the children are suffering. All the children see right now are angry parents. That's why child suicide is up too high. It's up too high. Why? Because the parents are not getting along and the neighbors are not getting along and the children are living in a broken world. Everybody knows what the term broken family means, right? That's what America is right now. See, with government, that's mother and dad to a lot of people's eyes. They're at odds. They're in a divorced state. The children are broken. And if Christians don't get up and start to unify by way of the heart, God does not reward violence. He will not reward it. He will absolutely intervene, is what he said. Because of violence, certain things will be destroyed in this earth, and all idols are going to be knocked down because of violence. And those who wrought this violence, they're going to pay for it. No one escapes from, they're going to pay their sentence.
Amen.
Whoever did it,
Amen.
It's coming.
Amen to that, Mike. All right, let's move into an area that while we're talking about these things, Kamala Harris. Okay, we understand. We're going to get to Afghanistan in a minute because our minds are blown by what we've been witnessing in the last, even since you were here last week. But Kamala Harris has been really absent. She's not by the president's side. He's been making all these. It's like he's taking all of the information. He's taking the heat for all the things going on, but he don't even act like it's bothering him. He doesn't act like it's even a problem. Kamala Harris, she's been in Singapore. She's been in Vietnam. She's been in Guam. While she was in Singapore, we had some of her staff that had their brains fried over in Vietnam before she ever got there. From what they call the Havana syndrome. She did get there 3 hours late. She had a ceremony, Mike. I want to ask you, where they gave her flowers, and she went up to a memorial to Vietnam soldiers, and these were North Vietnam soldiers, and she honored them with her flowers. But did she know that these were the soldiers that captured John McCain? Did she know?
I can only say this. Officially, she went to Vietnam to pay respects to where John McCain was shot down.
But she put flowers at their memorial for the guys that did it.
That's the only thing I can say. That's the only thing I can say. But that's odd. To go to a foreign country and do that is odd, right? Because you don't honor a site in hostile territory like that, or let's just say based on that memory, but you do it at home, right? If you want to honor the individual, you honor that individual at the resting place.
Yeah, you would honor John McCain.
Where, something like that happened. But remember, everything that is done is advised. Keep that in mind. It's not like they're making it up. Everything they do is advised. Everything they do is advised. And so you're looking at 25 to 30 people advising, a think tank advising all these things. Never think for 1 minute that they're just, they're the ones.
Well, who in the world? Who in the world, Mike? Who in the world would advise the vice president to put flowers at
Well, there you go. That's the problem, because each advisor has advisors. So you're looking at 400, 500, 600, 1,000 people who have the same mindset, and that's only the beginning. That's only the beginning. And you have to always remember something. There are a lot of things they do that represent their symbolism for other things. Symbolism, right? And it actually, if you look into it, sometimes you can get a little confused on those subjects, but later on you eventually find out.
Well, if this is a symbol, Mike, if this is a symbol, it's a bad symbol to give glory to the North Vietnamese who captured John McCain.
Well, they officially, they said they did it. She had, it was written that she did that to honor where he was shot down at.
That's the official.
That was official.
That's the official word.
That's the official version, because that's where he was. If you go back and you look at where his aircraft was shot down, it's in that right there in that vicinity. Is that the truth? Who knows? Right?
All right.
Who knows?
All right.
For one, though, when it comes to honor, right? You don't obscure honoring somebody. You make it plain, right? Yeah. To show respect, you always make it plain. You don't. It's not some clandestine operation.
Okay. Now let's move on. Now, how about the Mexico earthquake? We just had a 7-point earthquake yesterday. It first said it was 7.4. It was 7.0. Acapulco, New Mexico. Acapulco, Mexico. Now, the same time that was happening, Mike, there was before it happened, we had an explosion on the sun. The sun sent some CMEs that apparently ionized the atmosphere of the earth and created some incredible auroras of different colors: red, purple, green, yellow, just incredible. Now, this ionized atmosphere also when this happened, it fried some of the shortwave radio transmissions, especially around the Pacific Rim. Can you tell us, is there something going? I mean, and oh, by the way, just a couple hours after that happened, we had a 7.0 earthquake in Mexico, which is, by the way, happens to be that same ridge that runs right up to San Diego. So can you tell us, and it did some damage, killed some people down there in Mexico, but man, what's going on here, Mike, that we're seeing the sun,
Fastball, that's a weak spot. That should give everybody indication that when a CME is when it's ejected, or the sun affects the earth, or anything else affects the earth, and we have an earthquake, a significant earthquake in any area, at that moment, that's your weak point, right? Mexico is the wrong weak point to have, because it's right there by the Coast Plate. That's why I'm worried about Chile and Peru.
Yes.
That's precisely why. Mexico has the same effect on the Coast Plate, not as strong as Chile and Peru would, but if I tell you that area is destabilizing past fall, when it does, well, California had their due warning. Here's what I personally believe. Now, I'm going to step out on a limb here. Okay. California has problems, right? Last year, they had 3% of their drought was severe, over 3% of that state. Now it's 100% of that state this year. It was only 3% last year. By the numbers, it was only 3%. Now it's 100%. There are fires burning out of control every single year, and people keep trying to rebuild. Is the Lord trying to give them a message? Is he sending them a message? I understand that people can start these fires, but God has to allow something like that to take place for it to take place. Everybody's not operating in free reign, though they believe it. Only pride would allow a person to assume that. I believe that the Lord gives room for things like that if he so desires, for his will or for whatever purpose. I'm not going to question that. But you have folks in California that are not paying attention. You have a mass exodus from California to Texas. Right now, it's people are moving their businesses from California to Texas. People are moving out of California, going to other places.
Huge.
Is the Lord speaking? Is he speaking because it's drying up in California? Is that unfortunate, or is that a warning?
Well, I think both. Don't you think? It's a warning, and it is unfortunate. I mean, this is real, Mike. The Colorado River is drying up. That's insane. And you're talking about a lot of people who have been there. I mean, the population is not going down. Yes, people are moving out of Texas. Moving out of California into Texas, or maybe Tennessee or something, or Montana. But at the end of the day, there's still millions of people in California and in Arizona and in, the West Coast, Seattle and all that. But where that Colorado River is running, that thing is going dry. They can't, at the rate we're going, population growing, the water going dry, it's going to hit rock bottom. We're not going to make it, are we?
No, and California is also known. That whole place is turned just about into Sin City, say, for a couple of places out there, which means they permit too much of this new diverse activity. That can't be. This world can't continue to do that. And truly believe that the Lord's not going to intervene. He's going to chastise whom he loves. And if he cares about the USA, right, he's going to chastise whom he loves. And if he does that, he does so as sons, because there's not been mass death in the U.S. yet. All of what we went through, there's not been massive death.
No, you're right.
Not yet. Oh. But if we persist, if we keep saying we're going to build it, again, and this time a little stronger than before, and stay there and not change anything, then we're going to be in trouble, because God is full of grace. He's going to use this country. Here's the question. Who's going to be part of this country that he will use for his specific purpose? Because he's going to purge it, Pastor Paul.
Yes.
There are some folks in this country that they don't mean this country any good. right?
No.
He's going to purge this country. How he purges this country, we don't know.
No.
But we do know by the Bible's demonstration, when a purge comes, it's a bit vicious. It just happens that way. And we do have several new diseases that are sweeping, and coronavirus has mutated. They might give it a whole they might escalate its classification into a brand new virus. And it's another strain of the SARS family, but it's brand new. We have more animal transmitted viruses happening all over the
earth. Mike, also, we want to ask you a couple of questions here about back to Afghanistan for a minute. And we're trying to figure out, are we being... The first plane finally left out of Afghanistan today. It had 200 foreigners on it. We find out. We found out that of that, there were Canadians, Ukrainians, Germans, British, and Americans. We don't know how many, but they were among 200 foreigners. I think there was also several from the Middle East. So is this going to be, this is the first of 6 planes that were sitting on the tarmac for 10 days. Is this the beginning of a slow drip, drip, drip policy? Are we seeing this as part of their strategy, the Taliban, to slowly antagonize and slowly embarrass and agonize the Americans and the Western world?
Well, the Taliban, right? They don't like the USA. They don't like Western culture, period.
No.
Let's make no illusion about that. They don't like us. So if they have an opportunity to publicly embarrass us, they will. If they can hold hostages and get away with it, they will, right? This has happened before, and right now it's not even the Taliban, because they have recruited hardliners as their leadership, right? They've been looking over all of these guys that they have found to be recruited. And some of these guys are just flat out ruthless. They're going to have 17 more that are going to escape from various prisons. They're going to end up right there. They're setting up camp. They're doing this for an agenda, right? Pakistan, they might want to wake up. We have a real problem over there, Pascal. If we lose control over our diplomatic control in Pakistan, we have a big problem, because you're talking about a nuclear nation. And then at that point, they're going to demand certain things. Now, the funny thing is, they're not bound to Afghanistan, Pastor Paul. They're all over the place. Have you noticed the problems that Israel, well, I spoke prematurely, they're about to have a new problem. Israel,
what?
In coordination with Afghanistan.
What is it, Mike? What is it? What is it?
They have these attacks. They keep having this desire to attack. I'll say that. Israel needs to launch an offensive right away, because if they don't, they know they're going to have coordinated attacks from their northern region and possibly parts of their southern region.
Mike, you just said Jerusalem needs to make a preemptive strike.
They do. They do.
To who? Who they need to hit in the north? Iran, Turkey, Pakistan? Who?
You're looking right now, the situation in Israel is that when this alliance was forming, right, a lot of money shifted. Lots of money shifted. Not only the money, but equipment shifted. You have vulnerable armies surrounding Israel, which are being usurped. They're going to be usurped. Quite a few will be usurped.
Yes.
All of them are not bound to the Western ideology that Israel should be free.
No, you're right.
And I'm telling you right now, just as Afghanistan fell, which is a warning for all eyes to see, which is why most of the allies of the of the USA are upset because they see a pattern. So you're going to have coordinated attacks from their northern region and southern region. That's why Egypt right now, they have to make a decision tonight. They're going to have to make a decision tonight with their military to really, they're going to have to pull together some things, because the power, this power grab for Afghanistan is not some mediocre. It just, it's not, we're not talking about a couple hundred people here. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about all of the extra elements in the Middle East have bound themselves together under one banner for one cause, and it is to effect the ideology of Iran. That's what we're going to begin to see.
So we're down to the Iranian cause. You said this last week. You said there's everybody's coming around. Everybody's gathering in to the Iranian cause. What is the Iranian cause? Is it
to wipe Israel off the map?
Okay, they've said that. How many? Okay, so it's Psalms 83. It's exactly what it says in the Bible. And some people are going to join in. There's a confederacy. They're going to join in, and they're going to say, and I can read it right here. Maybe we should. Psalms 83. Here's what it says, folks. It's the Iranian cause. I believe that Mike's exactly right. Psalms 83 says these words: "Keep not thou silence, O God. Hold not thy peace, and be not still, O God. For lo, thy enemies have made a turmoil, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people," talk about the nation of Israel, "and consulted against thy hidden ones. And they've said, Come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they've consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee." So the Iranian cause is to cut off or to eliminate not to destroy Jerusalem, but to overtake Israel and say there's no more Israel. Is that right, Mike?
That's right. That's right. That's right. And if you look at Jerusalem right now, it's under high tension. It's even under UN scrutiny right now, right? And according to Joel, that land's going to be parted because God was upset in the book of Joel for them parting his land.
Yes, yes.
I mean, it's already parted, but they're going to return back to or try to enforce further division in Iran.
Well, Joe Biden wants to.
They have this, the entire Democratic structure has a different ideology than the Republican structure. And what they believe on the Democrat side is that if everybody can have a piece of the pie, right? And if they can recognize Palestine, everybody's happy. But that's not the case. That's not going to be the case. See, what we have here is the people believe one thing. The governments are doing something that the people don't want. So that's going to evoke a type of civil war like nobody has ever seen. Pastor, right now it's been a controllable issue in the Middle East because the people have been subservient to their governments. We're about to see that come to an end, where the people will say, nope, we're done with the governments here. I'm telling you, they're going to cut them off. And this is where the Muslim nations, 2 Muslim nations will rise. It's going to take Rome to side with one of those Muslim nations. And then, everything goes up from there.
They will.
Everything goes up from there.
They will. They always have, really, over you study history. I mean, I understand the Crusaders fought the Muslims and back and forth, and Jerusalem was attacked 29 times. It was conquered 19 times. It went back and forth. You had the Babylonian Empire, you had the Romans, you had the Ottomans, you had the Persians, you had the Grecians, you had the British. But it's really, most of the fighting was between the Muslims and the Crusaders, or Christians, if you will. And at the end of the day, Jerusalem is still the prize. Now, let me ask you a question. As you're talking about this happening in the Middle East, and we obviously can see that's happening, is there a civil war coming to America?
Oh yeah, better believe it. First of all, we still have a divided. We still have a deep divide in America. Period. A deep divide. Half the country they're not going to respond to the governments. You have governors of many states who will not allow the federal government to dictate anything to them either. So they're breaking camp with the federal government. You're looking at a split. We have I said this a long time ago, that America would divide into 5 portions and not according to FEMA.
5 portions? Okay, can you tell us what those 5 are?
The U.S. is going to be in 5
Tell us what can you tell us what those 5 are, Mike? In your opinion.
Well, we already know we have Democrat, Republican states, right? But within those camps of Democrat and Republican states, you have another divide. You literally have those who cannot stand anything New Age out of both sides. They don't agree with each other, so that's a further split. And what they're going to do is start taking control of these little towns, and they're going to set up their own little governments here and there, right? Now, here's an example of that. In 17 states, it's already begun. The governors have written a type of it's almost like a letter where they're informing the federal government of what they cannot do, right? They have already involved some pretty high courts.
So you're talking about
in their favor.
Okay, you're talking about Florida, Texas.
Oh no, we know about Florida and Texas.
But who else?
We know about them.
Who else?
There's 17 other states that are now actively breaking away from any federal mandates or anything else for the best interests of the people who live there.
Who else?
It's only going to be a matter of time because they have governors talking to governors now. So now we have coalitions of governors who are now in the mix, and they're going to push this down the chain. Why? Because you have the people who no longer have faith and confidence in their government.
Yeah.
And when that happens, that's an inevitable divide. The only thing that can halt that is new blood all the way around. Because if either side wins, the other side will not accept it. Period.
No, you're right.
If the Democrats stay in power, the Republicans are not going to accept
it.
If the Republicans come in power, the Democrats are going to reject it.
You're right.
The only way around that is to have you're going to have a brand new type leadership that is not like it is now.
Okay, here's a question. We know Florida, we know Texas is the strongmen of the, let's say, red state. We know California and New York and Illinois are the strongmen of the blue state. That's not a question. Now, President Trump has officially moved out of New York. I mean, yeah, he owns property there. He owns the buildings and all kinds of stuff there. But he has set up a Southern Command in Mar-a-Lago. I'm not saying that he's going to be the president of the southern states or the red states, but he certainly has established some type of home in Mar-a-Lago. So, but he is the former president, and he's not the first one to do something like that. Now, I'm asking you a question because you could see it coming. You pray to God it's not, but you could see it coming. I mean, I would think that Texas, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, even Indiana, North Carolina maybe, West Virginia for sure, Oklahoma makes 10. Here comes Arkansas. Here comes Missouri probably. And on. You could see it like it's basically southern, but right up to Indiana. Indiana's a red state. They may fold, but who knows? But because they're going to be seriously, this state I'm in right now is going to be surrounded by Ohio, Michigan, and Illinois around them. But I think Kentucky, and so they'll, I don't know. But you can see it happen. Don't forget South Carolina. Don't forget North Carolina. Don't forget Montana. Don't forget Wyoming. And don't forget Idaho. Those guys are going to hang in there. So this situation is strategically a dangerous thing that we're looking at here. So, Mike, I'm going to ask you, are we being overtaken as Americans by an ideology of the communists, by the Green New Deal, by the socialist mentality? Is China trying to divide and conquer and take this nation?
They don't have to. Look at what's already happened, Pastor Paul. Any division is a cancer. Any division, any ideological division is a deep cancer. The family unit has been torn up. It's gone. There's hardly nobody thinks of the family. How many people sit down for dinner with all their children? How many? The family unit
less than 10%. Less than 10% now. Less than 10%.
And ultimately, Satan has been doing this for many, many years. I could see it forming in the 80s, right? And we've gotten all the way up to this date, and people are so stuck in their earthly ideologies, they have forgotten about what the Lord wants and what the Lord thinks. They're doing what flesh wants, right? This is going to cause further divides. Even within the Republican Party right now, there's a divide of Republicans. There's a divide of Democrats,
rhinos,
and everything
you
else.
talk about rhinos, Mike.
Serious problems.
Rhinos. There's these rhinos are really trying to straddle the fence. You're right. You are so.
Yeah, we have some problems.
Is there any division among the Democrats?
Oh yes, yeah. There are three. You have Democrats divided in three camps. You have these independent type Democrats. You have the Democrats that still believe in the Republic, but they're very few. They're still Democrats, but they're very, very few. And then you have these hardliner Democrats. I can't even say far left because that's like far left and far right now is so normal. The term is gone. So you have all these different camps. That's a lot of division, Pastor Paul. And it will manifest itself this winter with the governors making their decisions of action. You'll see it this winter.
Okay, now let's talk about this. Let's talk about Jerusalem. Let's talk about the Middle East for a moment because I think this is a great conversation we're having. Okay, so we know that Joe Biden just said, and Blinken and all of those guys, that they're going to open the consulate. They're going to open an American consulate back in East Jerusalem and reopen it. Not going to mess with the U.S. Embassy. It's in Jerusalem now. They're going to leave it alone. That Trump pulled that off. He moved the U.S. Embassy out of Tel Aviv into Jerusalem on the 70th anniversary. They know they can't shut that down. It would create a massive uproar. But they are going to reopen the consulate in East Jerusalem. Now, I've been there. Way back in 2013, when I was in Jerusalem, I actually was staying in a hotel. I think it was called the King's Court Hotel or whatever. But it was in East Jerusalem, and I didn't even realize. And I was out walking one day, and I walked right by the British consulate, and then I walked by the American consulate, which is now closed. And because it's been moved back, it's been moved to the new U.S. Embassy. But apparently Joe Biden has announced that he is going to move the consulate and reopen it in East Jerusalem for the Palestinians. So this two-state solution, divide the city of Jerusalem, two-state solution, it's really a real deal by Joe Biden. What is your thoughts on how this plays out with the Afghanistan, Taliban, and all the other groups that are in the Middle East?
Well, what they do in the Middle East, if they do that, that's kind of in favor of one of the plans to usurp Jerusalem, period. One of the greatest fears is this. Jerusalem should actually, in all honesty, if this were a perfect world, Jerusalem should be handed over totally to Israel and secured. But they won't secure the place. It's already divided into, what is it, four or five quadrants right now.
Yes, you're right.
It's always under dispute. So
yes.
What Joe Biden wants to do is he's doing this through on one table, right? And to have some sort of agreement, everybody a piece of the pie. He's trying to make everybody happy We know by now you can't make everybody happy. That's called compromise. I don't believe in making everybody happy because when righteousness is in the land, right? Evil is upset.
Yes.
That's what I believe, right? So, but if you compromise the slightest bit with darkness, with anybody who would have any dark agenda or anything else, you've got a problem. What they should do is question the people and say, listen, anybody over here who is found to be loyal to the Israeli cause, then you guys are free to do so and so or whatever. You know, I mean, a real vetting action, possibly maybe a probationary period of living in peace or something like that. But when you start involving everybody over there and you start drawing those people together, that's going to cause a big problem. That's going to cause a huge problem. And we know that war is right around the corner because these biblical events, they're going to be kicked off before anybody expects it to kick off. They really are. We're at a very high danger point right now. Very high danger point. Our defense net over the whole USA is almost active. The entire defense net. That's unusual.
Are you worried
It's
about?
expensive. It's
Are
unusual.
you worried right now? I mean, do you believe that right now Tony Blair made a statement? Do you think that NATO is pretty well dead? Do you think we would come rushing to Taiwan's back, or Singapore's, or Japan's, or Poland's? And do
You know
you
what I think
see?
would happen,
Yeah.
Principal? What I honestly believe is that due to our patrols and placement right now, if something were to happen, somebody is not going to have the support they need. Somebody's not going to have the support they need. Look at the Afghanistan situation, right? Clearly, they underestimated the resolve of the Taliban. Clearly, they underestimated the cause of the Taliban because it was on the table to have military escorts for people to get out, and the military would get out following all the civilians and the Afghanistan people, Afghanistan Americans had to get out, and the other families. But due to underestimating the Taliban, because they did not know that they were in communication with the people they were in communication with. See, that's one of the things about Afghanistan. Look how long this little war has been going on. Why? With those people, without technology, how could they sustain combat against the U.S. and all these other countries for all those years? People ought to ask themselves that. How could this ragtag group of people fight the USA? How could they fight coalition forces and sustain that fight for all those years? That's what you got to ask yourself, because they know they can never have a clear count of the individuals involved in the Middle East because of underground chambers, underground tunneling, underground caverns and facilities. You're looking at a lot of people right now. The count is over 500,000 of those ragtag group of individuals. So when that number actually hits the public's eye, and they find out that, my goodness, these guys have put together an army of a little over 500,000. How did that happen? Right?
Yeah.
They've been coordinating all this time. They've been coordinating. They've been training. They have been, assessing everything. Some of the folks who were assisting the U.S., they were learning, right, about our
They were
equipment,
getting
tactics,
funding.
and
They were
everything
getting
else.
funding also, Mike. I mean, they were getting funding during 20 years. They come out like champions. How in the world?
Because we underestimated it. Because everybody thought.
Yeah, but no. Besides underestimated, I agree with you. Were we complicit? Are we complicit in the revival of the Taliban?
We were arrogant. We were truly arrogant, believing in our own resolve. For the last 13 years, we've been too arrogant. We actually believe that we knew them. That's a big mistake. That's a big mistake. No, to know a Middle Eastern person, you have to be born as one. That's the saying. If you're not born in the Middle East, you don't know a Middle Eastern individual, period. So for the last 13 years, we have been fooled big time, period.
Can I ask you, Mike, are you worried about 9/11? Are you worried about 2 days from today? What do you think is going to happen?
Pastor Paul, I feel comfortable if all the celebration and everything people are having, right? Especially the football, if it would begin a bit later with security in mind. We can't be arrogant again and believe that they don't have the wherewithal to attack us, because they can easily get us from the inside. People have been locked in their homes for too long. There's no telling what somebody has invented inside their homes and could carry to some of these events. All they have to do is lay low and go to one of those events like they're everybody else, and then kapoof, you don't know who's who. You don't know who's who because everybody's been on lockdown.
Here's the question. You're right.
Just,
is the sleeper cells in America more than they were 20 years ago?
I think they lost accountability. They lost accountability, Pastor Paul.
So in other words,
no way to know.
we don't know, and that's a bad.
No way to know.
That's a bad. How about the southern border being so wide open? Are you afraid that there's sleeper cells sliding through there?
Well, I know for a fact that through Canada, there are problems with the Canadian border. I know that for a fact. I know for a fact that on the East Coast, there's been some traffic that shouldn't be. I know that for a fact. I know everybody's looking at the southern border, but the enemy is not going to come where everybody is looking and scrutinizing, which is why most of the stuff that's been coming into the U.S. for the last, maybe 11 or so years, they've caught some stuff down the southern border. But the East Coast is on fire right now.
Wow, folks. Mike around the world with us tonight, folks. I mean, he's been very, very upfront with us, been very plain. He's been very, very, very candid. And I've threw everything at him I know to throw at him tonight, and he's answered every one of those. He's been very, very. We're not just dealing with the Afghanistan and the Middle East and all that, but we're dealing with principalities and powers. Talk about that tonight. We're dealing with incoming meteorites and asteroids, birthing pains of the last days. Near misses are everywhere. I mean, folks, I think Mike, you would agree. This is it. We're just about to the end. I don't know how much more we got left, how much time we got left. It can't be a whole lot. People really need to be saved, don't they?
Oh, yeah. No, we don't have a lot of time left. In fact, I believe that people are going to find that out painfully sooner than they would like.
Let me ask you a question, Mike. Are you more worried about America being overtaken first or the outside forces, let's say the incoming meteorites, asteroids, and those type of things? Which one's going to...
Well, I know we're going to have some infrastructure challenges, right? And that could be bad, but nothing will compare with the celestial happenings.
So the infrastructure challenges you think are going to come from terrorist organizations and groups, but nothing compared to what's coming from the heavens.
That's right. That's right. That's my number one. That's my number one issue right now, and people are just not ready for that. They've seen the movies, but it's not like the movies.
Well,
it really isn't like.
Okay, now you're telling us that we've seen the movies, but our government's not telling us that, and you've told us the reason they're not because they can't create a panic. They're trying to figure out a way to survive the apocalypse. We better open our eyes and realize that all of the things that are happening in Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21 are coming to pass right now. We better get ready.
They are, and we're seeing them. We're seeing them. And the Lord did say, the generation that sees all these things, that generation will not pass till all these things be fulfilled. So we're the ones that can see it.
Mike, this is a great broadcast. I really appreciate your candidness and being up front with us and telling us exactly what's happening. That's why people love to come here on Thursday nights for you and I to share this information and to help people understand we're in the last days. And I just want to thank you again, brother, for being faithful for the gospel of Jesus Christ.
And, folks, as you can tell, that was a pretty lengthy interview, and I appreciate you hanging in there. But it was a needed deal. And we're going to close with this. Again, in Daniel 7:25, when he talks about this beast system, he says that he will speak against the Most High and oppress his saints. Who are they coming after now with this COVID? who are the ones that they're saying? Well, it's these Christians and these Trump supporters and those blah, blah, blah that hold on to family values and all that. So Biden is saying, I don't care if you think I'm Satan. We've got everything anti-God, closing down the churches. So, he will speak against the Most High and oppress the saints and try to change times and laws, which is what they're doing. They're changing times and laws. It's no longer a time of family and family values. It's this new age of time. And we can see they're changing laws was just shoving the Constitution under the rug. But the saints will be handed over to him for a time, times, and half a time. So we're going to be handed over to this beast, folks, for a time, and half a time. And so real quick, a time, the one time, it represents a period of trouble, danger, struggle, and testing. Faith is tested in many ways. God's people are not immune from tribulation of various kinds. Even at the best of times, our Christian life is quite a struggle because we are involved in a battle between good and evil. And then it says times, plural. The 2 times represents double trouble, pain upon pain. Some suffering and hardship can be very intense or prolonged with no end in sight. Peter spoke of the fiery trial, which is to try you in 1 Peter 4:12. In even the most terrible tribulations, however, we are never forsaken by God or separated from the love of Christ. And then the half a time. The half a time, it represents the same thing as the one time or the 2 times, but it puts it in a different light. It represents a time of tribulation from God's point of view, and there are 3 tribulations in the sense that are shortened, because no flesh would be left alive, or to reduce or troubles, or to cut them in half. These are outlined of how God's He halves our sufferings. So I would say that we're in the number 2 times, and here pretty soon we're going to be facing the half a time. And we know the days are going to be cut short or no flesh would survive. So folks, I know it was a lengthy broadcast, but I think it needed to be known. A lot was shared, and I greatly, greatly appreciate you hanging in there with me tonight. Thank you, Sister Jamie, for your presence, gracing the stage with elegance once again. And it's just a blessing to be here and to be well. So thank you, each and every one. Thank you for being a part. And we'll definitely, Lord willing, and the creeks don't rise, we'll be with you next weekend. So, a lot of stuff going on, folks. Point your eyes to Christ, submit to God, and follow Him in His ways only. Trust no man, trust no one. Don't even trust Mike, but do take what he has said, tuck it in the back of the mind, and if these things start happening, we know where we are, and it's our duty then to teach people why we are where we are. And how to survive. So thank you again. We'll catch you later. Till next time, I am Old Smokehouse. Bye-bye.
Smokehouse. To talk with Smokehouse, dial 712-770-3857. That number once again is 712-770-3857. Then dial the access code 252-380, followed by the pound sign, and you will be placed in the queue. Call in and join the show.
SmokehouseStudios.net. God is among us. The door to the ark is slamming shut.